Welcome to another episode of Game Changers for Government Contractors. I am your host, Michael LeJeune, and I have a treat for you today. I'm going to be talking about the top 15 myths about government contracting. These were 15 that I came up with, and I'm like, man, I get these all the time. Usually, when I get on the phone with somebody who's thinking about coaching or joining our group coaching program or whatever it may be, they usually have 3 to 5 of these questions, and I wanted to answer them for all of you. So the first really big myth, and this one kind of burns me a lot because I see a lot of people out there trying to take advantage of folks like yourself with this one. This one is that government contracting can be a side hustle. It's just not a side hustle. This is a full-time gig. The government doesn't like it when people are doing this as a side hustle. The government doesn't often give contracts to people when it's a side hustle. And it's extremely difficult to respond to bids, do the research you need to do as a side hustle. You need to be all in. You just do. As a matter of fact, if you are looking for a side hustle, this is probably the last thing I would recommend for you. The process is just too long. And even if you were lucky enough to win a contract, some stroke of luck, the odds of you being able to fund the contract are really, really difficult as a side hustle, because you're starting a side hustle because typically you don't have a whole lot of money. And you're trying to dig out of whatever you're doing. There are a lot of other side hustles that I would recommend to people. You could be an Amazon affiliate. You could be an affiliate for a handful of other different stores and brands that are out there. Those gigs pay money almost immediately, and they don't require you doing a whole lot more than posting a handful of videos on social media, directing them to your affiliate links, and getting paid. That's it. And people do really, really well. I know people making 7 figures as an affiliate marketer. That is a really good side hustle. You can do it 2 to 3 hours a week to start. Then you can add another hour or so a day here and there. That's a good side hustle. I strongly urge you, if you're looking for a side hustle, don't look at government contracting. It's not for you. It's too difficult. You're going to get too frustrated. The second one on here is that your status is a golden ticket. Most people will go out and collect every status they could possibly find. They're going to get their WSB, their veteran-owned status, their small disadvantaged woman-owned, you name it status. They're going to get that and think, now the money's going to roll in. And it just doesn't. The government is constantly complaining about agencies not hitting their set-aside goals. That means they're not hitting the goals that are specifically for your status. Now, some agencies are getting better. Some have always been really good, but a lot don't. There's a fraction of the budget spent on this. And so it's not a golden ticket. You have to understand what value you provide, not just saying, hey, my status is my value. So that was number 2. Number 3, the myth is sales is sales. Cold calling is effective. It's not. It's not just a numbers game in this business. People can smell that a mile away and they will give you the brush off. It's not. Sales is not the same in this market as it is anywhere else. And I would argue you probably shouldn't be doing sales the way you are in the commercial world anyway. But to the point here, you have to do more research-based sales. You have to understand the sales cycle is much longer. You're going to have to submit RFPs, RFQs, RFIs. You're going to have to submit a lot of stuff and wait. Sales is different in government contracting. The other myth here, number 4, is the lowest price always wins. That's not true. The lowest technically acceptable, right? So we have LPTA contracts, the lowest price technically acceptable. Those are often what wins, but it's based on the value. Is the value that they are providing over here on the right the same as on the left? And if the value is different, they can often look at that and say, well, we're going to go with this contract that's $1 million more because of the value we're getting by going with this other contract. So it's not always a lowest price guarantee, even in LPTA. So even if it is an LPTA contract, there are situations, many situations that I've seen over the years where it wasn't the lowest bidder who won, but it was the bidder, again, who came in with the best value. And that's the one they chose because overall it was just a better deal for the government. So maybe they had, it was I'm not saying this is how you would do it, but it's a buy two, get one free. And everybody else was just, here's what one cost, right? And so there are situations where people bake other value in, whether it's assessments or reports or other work into the system, or even with products where they will get a better price by hitting a certain volume mark, or they'll go back to their reps and say, hey, I've got a client and they're willing to buy 1,000 of these widgets. Would you give me a better price for that? So they're not necessarily struggling to make the profit, which is another one. People think you can't make money in this market, that government work isn't profitable. That's not true. I just gave you an example how you could actually have a lower price than someone else and have a higher margin because you've negotiated better rates with the actual manufacturer. I've done that. I've done that in the past. I've negotiated better rates with Microsoft, of all people. And that allowed us to get way more profit into deals than we were before because we were getting volume pricing out of Microsoft. So government contracting can be very, very profitable. It is also very scalable. And the more you scale, the more profit. And the thing about it is, especially if you're looking to build a business and exit, it's very stable. So your multiplier is often bigger in something like this, where you have multi-year contracts, you're diversified very well. It can be very, very profitable. I know people that have sold their companies for multi-millions of dollars and never had to work again. So it can be extremely profitable. So once you get a contract, you're set for life. That's number 6 on here. So once you get a contract, you're not set for life. You have to perform on the contract consistently. You have to win more contracts and you have to keep going back to the well. Now, there are some situations where you have a 2, 3, 4 person company and you have one contract. And man, like we've had this contract for 12 years and the government isn't going anywhere because we're like, there's only 2 people in the world that can do this work. And those 2 people work for me. You might keep that contract for a long time, but you're not going to grow. You're just not going to grow. And so that's where it's really up for you. But at any given point in time, the government can cut funding to a contract. The government can reduce funding. The government could say, hey, we're not happy with you anymore. We're going to put out an RFP and somebody else is going to beat you and win the work. Winning a contract does not mean you're set for life. You still have to perform. Number 7 on my list, responding to RFPs will get you a contract. That's partially true. If you respond to hundreds of RFPs, I'm going to guess you're going to get better over time and eventually you're going to win something. Eventually. But why just respond blindly to RFPs when you could be smart about it and do less RFPs and win more contracts? So I don't think you should just blindly respond to RFPs, which is at the heart of what this myth is. Just respond. It doesn't matter if you know the agency. It doesn't matter if you know the product or service. Just respond and you'll win stuff. And when I see people talk about this online, they talk about it as all you have to do is respond to one and you'll win. That's all you have to do. People that respond blindly often have to respond to dozens, if not hundreds of RFPs to win because they don't know what they're doing. And if you're responding to a toilet paper RFP or RFQ on one day, and the next day you're responding to a cybersecurity one, and the next day you're responding to janitorial, and the next day you're responding to machine parts, and the next day plumbing parts, you're never going to understand the pricing well enough to do it. You're just not. And that's why it often takes a lot of contracts, a lot of losses. And I would bet most people will get discouraged before they even reach 10 by doing that. They'll be like, hey, after 10 of those, man, I don't see many people going past that. I just don't. So don't respond blindly to RFPs. That's not how you win. You win by having the right information and relationships and partners. Another one is number 8 here is you need a GSA schedule. Everybody that I hear says, oh, I need a GSA schedule. The first thing I ask is, well, have you done the research to see, number 1, who buys what you sell, But number two, how they buy, because what if they don't buy on GSA? Oh, well, then I don't need a GSA schedule. Bingo. More than 50% of GSA schedule holders never win a contract. That tells me there's a good chance you don't need a GSA schedule, but you might need a different contract vehicle. And that's why it's important to figure out who buys what you sell and how they buy what you sell. Number 9 on my list is the government pays slow. The government pays on time for the most part. If you have net 15, net 30, whatever it is, the government's pretty good about making that payment on time. Now, if you close the government today on a deal and then they say, well, do the work and then invoice us and then pay us, well, that could be 30 days, could be 60 days. It just depends on what you have to do. So you have that cycle up front initially where you've got to go a full 30 days where you've done the work. Then you invoice and it's net 30. And so there's another 30 days before you get paid. So that's about a 60-day cycle. And again, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people that try this as a side hustle fail, because they can't bridge the gap in that 60 days to deliver the product or service and not get money, because they don't have a bank or the banking set up. They don't have any financing set up. They don't have a credit line, credit cards, whatever it may be. And if you just want a $50,000 contract, which is a small contract in the government space, if you just want a $50,000 contract for products and you try to reach out to a manufacturer and say, hey, I need $50,000 worth of product shipped, they're going to want either all or at least 50% of that. And if you're doing this as a side hustle, you likely don't have $25,000 or $50,000 to give them to front them on the product cost or whatever it is the product costs are going to be on that, because you're going to have margin and all that kind of stuff. So the government pays when they say they're going to pay. The caveat to this is as long as your ducks are in a row. Your invoices has to be submitted properly. It has to match the purchase order and all those types of things. It has to match your contract. If it doesn't, you're going to get it rejected. So you have to have your ducks in a row in order to get payment properly. Next one on my list here, number 10, is that all opportunities are listed on sam.gov. That is not true. We have done some research, and depending on the agency, about 20 to maybe 30% of their opportunities go on SAM. Some people put everything on SAM, but most don't. Most stuff goes through a contract vehicle. It goes through a simplified acquisition. It can go on a credit card purchase. It can go to a sole source. And the only thing you're going to see on SAM is a notice to award, or you'll see it in the history that it was awarded. So a lot of opportunities are not listed on SAM. You've got to look for them in other ways. You've got to discover them by building relationships with contracting officers. Not everything's listed on SAM, only a fraction of it. Number 11, the government likes to give out sole source contracts. Absolutely not true. Even though they have the ability, and it should streamline the process. If you don't have a relationship and you haven't proven yourself in some way, shape, or form, the government is extremely hesitant to use sole source contracts. And I'll tell you one of the reasons. If you remember back in COVID, there was a guy, I don't remember his name. He won a multi-million-dollar contract. I think it was like a $300 million contract for maybe like a contract like in Haiti or something like that. I don't remember what he was supplying. And the reason the article made headlines is the headline was something along the lines of government contractor caught with 4 Lamborghinis. So instead of actually buying the stuff he was supposed to buy through this sole source contract that happened, the guy goes out and buys 4 Lamborghinis, and he's not doing the work. He's not calling the government. He's just cashing checks, right? And this is somebody that, they have to deal with. The government doesn't want that. The government doesn't need that kind of press. And so it's not just those situations, but those sole source contracts are there for a purpose. They're not there to just hand out to everybody because they can. It's for a purpose. So the government just doesn't hand them out to everybody just because they could. So they do hand them out, but not just because they could. Number 12 on the list, you have to have a bid matching system. You don't. You don't have to go out and buy a $10,000, $5,000, I've seen $20,000 bid matching systems that pour all this information into your business. At least not at first. That is for sure. Maybe when you get larger, some of those things are helpful. You may be saying, well, Mike, maybe that'll help me go faster. When you're just starting out, you can get by with the main systems, sam.gov, USA Spending, and a couple of other agency websites. You're good to go. You don't necessarily need that out of the gate. You don't have to have a bid matching system. Number 13 here is that the process is too complicated. The process is not that complicated, and the process for the most part hasn't changed a whole lot in the last 25 years of me being in this business. So once you learn the process with your agencies, it's rinse and repeat. It's just new to you. That's why it's complicated. And that's the only reason. It's not that complicated. You just have to learn the system. I learned it from scratch with none of the tools that are available today. Me and my partner, Josh Frank, did this back in 2002. We started selling multi-millions of dollars of software to the government. We didn't have sam.gov. Back then, it would have been FedBizOps, but we didn't know that existed. All we had was phone books and agencies that we knew existed. And I think we were using Yahoo search. Google wasn't a thing either. And we were using those kind of things to find people. We're using our contacts. We were working those old school sales tactics to get in and talk to agencies. And that's what we did. So you can do it too. It's not that complicated. Number 14 on the list, you need connections to succeed. When we started in this business, we didn't have a ton of connections, but we leveraged the handful we had to make more and more and more and more. And often what you're going to find is, let's say you were in the Army and you knew a lot of the people who bought stuff at your command. When you exit, even though those people may be your best friends, they don't want a phone call from you that says, hey, I'm now selling for this company and you could really help me out if you help direct an RFP my way or something along those lines, right? Those things are not going to be received very well. So oftentimes the connections you have from the military or whatever, they may only get you so far. Now, should you talk to those people? Absolutely. But you should treat them as professionals and you should follow a process with them, not just say, hey, man, give me a contract. You could do that. Now, your goal should be to build your network as quickly as you can. Teaming partners. Teaming partners is a big one. You've got to build teaming partners. You've got to find contracting officers. You've got to meet with small business reps. You've got to find all those people, and you've got to build that network as quickly as you can. Because over time, you will build the right little infrastructure of people to help you succeed. But you only need a couple. You don't have to have 50 people who are in sales positions or contracting positions or whatever it is in order for you to succeed. You can start with one. Hell, you can start with none. And there's so much information available today that you can find people, build relationships. You can go to one conference. We just left the Vets conference. I'm recording this in early June after the Vets conference. We just left that conference. There were plenty of people there that it was their first week in government contract. They'd never really done any government contract, didn't know a lot about government contract, didn't know anyone, and they left that conference with a small Rolodex of new contacts and people that they could start working. You could do it too. I know you can. I did it. The last one that I'm going to put on here is that you have to be in the DMV, or commonly known as the DC Metro. You have to be in the DMV in order to sell to the government. I've been selling to the government since 2002. I've never lived in the DMV. Never. I traveled there frequently and sat in my office because that's what my boss wanted me to do. And I only had 5, maybe 6 in-person meetings in the DMV while I was there. That's it. Most of the stuff I did was over the phone. Most of our clients don't live anywhere near the DC Metro, and they all have multi-millions of dollars. Now, does it help to be close to a military installation or a government facility or something like that? Maybe. If that's someone you target, if that's not your target agency, it doesn't matter how close you live to that Air Force base or Army base or Navy installation. Doesn't matter. that's not your target market. So those things can be an advantage because you have proximity, you can get to events easier, things like that. But you can do all of this over the phone, through Teams, through Zoom. You can do it all through there. You don't have to live in the DC metro. So those are my top 15 myths about government contracting. I hope those help dispel some of those myths for you. I have personally busted every single one of these. There's probably 15 or 20 more. Don't believe the hype when someone says this is too hard for you to do. You can do it. You just have to be dedicated. You have to be able to put in the time on this. That is one of the biggest lessons learned for me and for a lot of my clients over the years. If you have any questions about this or anything else government contracting related, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or via email. We'll see you next episode.